Right. So what we discussed in the previous session about in context to SQL, so connect of Python is what something which I have shown you, right? So now today I'm going to discuss about Python part. Right? So because Python is also one of Python, SQL is a query language, right? So that is to extract data queries, right? So that is all something comes under queries part. But whereas when it comes to the Python is also a language, but it's a programming language because I must explain you what programming language meant for. Because programming language is the one which will be used to write business logics for any of the project. Let's say, because for example, 1 plus 2, right? So 1 plus 2 equal to 3, right? So let's say if you are a user, you have given 1 plus 2 on screen. So whenever you press an enter button, you get a result as 3. How you got that? Because there was an instruction in a kind of through using a programming language, there was an instruction given to the system. So that system understand the instructions which was given by you. Subsequently, whenever you have mentioned some calculation, it was given a result as 3. The kind of language we are using now. For example, we are using a language called English, or it can be of any other language we are using for communicating between humans. If you want to communicate between two different humans or among humans, we use different communication languages, like it can be English or it can be anything. In the same manner, whenever if you want to instruct something to the system, which is a physical entity, but it's not a human entity. How come system understands? If system wants to understand something, we have to use a language which system can understand or receive. So that's where generally programming language come into picture. Programming language meant for that. Languages are different because one is about markup languages we call because whatever the HTML, DHTML, all these are used for markup languages. Markup languages are used to prepare screen. For example, whatever the screen we see it on the, let's say login page, right? So if you want to create a login page, something user ID password for that purpose, whatever the screen we prepare, that screen we have to write some code in back of it. That's where we call it as HTML code. Using HTML, that screen we can create. That's all we call it as markup language, right? HTML and all called as hypertext markup language, which will create some specific front screens. Normally application have two, one is front screen, second is backend, front and backend. Whatever the front screen you see, that is what we call it as forms, F-O-R-M-S, forms. And whatever the backend result we get is called reports, right? Forms, front end, reports, backend. Forms using HTML forms, reports. It can be database reports, usually third-party tools, kind of crystal reports and all everything, we use it. Backend. Reports are backend, final result is report. Form is to enter. So if you want to enter some information, there must be a form. That form is called presentation layer where we can create using different languages. One of the languages called markup language, which will be used to create that front pages. HTML, DHTML, Dreamweaver, PHP, right? These are the different technologies we use to create front page designing, all that, right? So this is markup language, HTML, all that. Next is a modeling language. Modeling language means if you want to visualize the requirements, because if you see when I taught you business analyst training, I have shown you UML diagrams. Prepare means whatever the tool are we using, okay, leave it. Irrespective of the tool, whatever the use cases, sequence diagrams, which was shown to you. These are all we call it as UML, modeling language. Means UML is a modeling language where you model the requirements. Means if you want to model any requirements and all, this is what something which normally we use. This is point number 2. After modeling language, the next is programming language. That's what we are discussing now. Query language, anyway, you know it. I already explained earlier. Programming language is third one, I can say. Programming language is the one which is used to give instructions to the system to give you the result that whichever is that we want. If we want to give result, there must be some instructions we have to give it to the system. That's where generally this programming language come into picture. There are different programming languages, C++, which we are using for a very long time. Java, even for more than 2 decades, we are using it. Is also one of the programming language. At the same time, we have Python even. Now, whatever I'm going to show you, Python is also one of the programming language. Ruby, Kotlin, there are a lot of programming languages we have. But prominency, whatever we heard more, I'd say prominency from the context of whatever we heard more are 2 programming languages nowadays. One is Java, second is Python. So where Java is being used, where Python is being used. First of all, you must be knowing. Java is a programming language which normally we use whenever we are creating some web applications. For example, any e-commerce kind of applications we are developing. Or if you are developing any enterprise applications or client server applications, standalone applications, 3-tier architecture related um, or it can be mobile applications or maybe mobile applications. We have other programming languages can also be used, but end of the day. So what are the web applications widely we use? So for that, the kind of programming language is called Java. Java is a programming language which will be used for that purposes. Second is Python. Python is a programming language we use when we are working on the data analysis side. Means if you want to work on any data analysis side, this is used for that. Python is a programming language we use for the data analysis side. Means if you want to analyze any kind of data, because whatever we discussing, because of that you are learning Python. Okay, because data analysis, if you want to do any analysis of data, we must be knowing and we must be learning about Python. So why Python, for what purpose, all that. Because Java, normally for web applications, that's not something related here. But when we are learning data analysis, it's always important for us to learn about a language called Python. Python is a programming language, mainly data analysis related projects. Generally, this Python is being something which normally we use. So basic level of Python is what something which normally required for us to learn, right? So when we are learning about any Python language or something like, we must be knowing some basics of it, because how to create some example, right? How to create a code, especially in Python, all that, right? So I'm just giving you an example by creating hello world example. I'm just showing you one example on an example, but basics I'll teach you, right? So, but just I show you how this program works and all. So when you are going to write any Python code, especially this is an editor of Python, because Python is an open source, point to be noted. You can go to Google and you can search it up and you can download the Python application. For example, Python download, right? So you can click on Python download. Here you can see Python download Python. You can click on it. It's an open source, as I told you. You have an option called download Python. and it is for Windows or something like whatever is required. So we can simply click on it and follow the instructions so that you can easily install it. So nothing much difficult for you to install it. So when it comes to the Python, right? So as in when we are working on Python as a programming language, especially when we are working for data analysis, print is a statement. This is what we call it a statement. We have to understand statement. Print is a statement. What statement are we going to write? We are going to write a statement called hello world. Okay, for example, because hello world is a common example we normally see, not we, anyone, right? So whoever you are learning at as beginning, generally hello world is what something which normally we use as a example for hello world. Okay, the reason I've taken this, right? So print hello world. So you get a result called hello world, right? So this is how usually a program which you have to write. And this is what हम बोलते हैं source code. Whatever the code you're writing, right? Whatever the program you're writing over here, this is all something which we call it as this is the code which was written, print hello world, and whatever the result you got is hello world, right? So that's what generally it is being used for. So when we are working on any kind of Python, right? So whenever, for example, you want to, let's say, for example, you want to know uh, what I can say. For example, you want to know about, you want to write some strings. Okay, string is what something you want to write, right? For example, uh, you want to give a message, right? For example, I want to learn Python or something like, right? So if you want to create any kind of any programming that I want to learn Python or messages and all everything, there are examples which normally we write using this Python string, right? So string is what? String is a variable, type of variable which normally we use. This variable can be a message, whatever you are releasing. For example, I want to learn Python, right? This is what system want to show. So for that we can create, all right? So we have to create a code for that. Code. That's what we are writing. Source code we call it as. We have to write a code and we have to show so that people will understand this better, right? So this is how generally these codes and all everything will work. At the same time, if you want to access any kind of string characters for any of the Python, right? So if you want to create any kind of string accesses, or if you want to create any kind of strings for immutable, whatever the codes are we going to write, or if you want to write any kind of multiple lines of string for Python, okay. So if you want to create any kind of multiple links of the strings of the Python, or if you want to create any kind of string operations, okay, or if you want to create any kind of iterations for Python strings, or if you want to create any kind of Python string lengths or member, so any Python string lengths, right? So all these things we can create using this Python programming, or else if you want to create any kind of comments also, whatever the Python comments you want to write, so that you can write in the Python comments also. That is also one of the key and important element we can do it. At the same time, if you want to print any Fibonacci series, for example, if you want to create any kind of Fibonacci series here, right? So if you want to create any kind of Fibonacci series by creating the source code, so all these things we can do, right? So these are all something which as an examples I can show you when you want to write any kind of Python programming language. All these things are something which normally we use, right? So whenever we are working on Python as a programming language, whenever we want to learn, especially from the context of data analysis, we want to, these are the different languages we want to write. So these are the different examples we want to learn, right? So you want to create any kind of generators, or if you want to create any kind of functions or a Fibonacci series, right? Or else if you want to create any kind of strings, okay, or if you want to create any Fibonacci sequences. So all these things we can do using this Python programming. This is what something which normally we have to write. Means if you want to swap any kind of variables, or if you want to create any kind of triangles, if you want to create any kind of random number. So basic understanding over Python and how to write Python is what something which, being a data analyst, you must be good with. At the same time, before you want to learn it, it's always important for you to know about what is string, what is character, what is variable. So these are the basics you need to learn, because writing a program, especially on Python, is not something uh, I don't use a word called great, but it's not something enough. Okay, because writing a Python code, like as what I shown you, if you have some basic idea, you can write it. It's not an issue. Of course, this comes with practice. End of the day, this is not something we get it with this thing one overnight or something like that. It comes with practice. But end of the day, when you are going to learn any programming language, because what is that you are learning is a programming language. Do remember it. Either it can be Python or any other. It can be Java or something like. Programming language is what something you are learning. So whenever you are learning any Python programming language, it's always important for you to know about the basics of it, because I could see, as I told you earlier also, because I focusing more on the foundations and basics to you from the beginning. If you remember, even for SQL also, I did the same. Because being you guys are from non-IT, most of the people I could see, when you are learning any programming, because for business analyst and all, that is different, because those are all scenario-based learning you're doing. So if you have some basic communication skills and verbal written communication, all that, so can be managed to an extent. Of course, you require some other skill set for BA and all, even for testing, all that. But when it comes to slowly, when it comes to the data analysis, when it comes to the SQL, or when it comes to the Python, so learning basic standards of programming is essentially required, especially when we are talking about Python, all that. What is string? What is function? What is variable? What is variable declaration? What is class? What is object? These are all the terminologies we want to use when we are working on the programming language. Okay. When you are writing any programming language, these are the basics which you have to learn, which you have to know. Unless until if you don't have this basic programming understanding, it is difficult for you to write down the code, okay, which is not something possible to do it. So it is always important when you are going to write any kind of programming languages or something, it's always important for you to learn about the basics of programming, because complexity of writing the code when you are going for advanced level under data analysis might be different. It will not be the same for all the people, because even in Python there is advanced level Python also. That is not required, because that is required exclusive for the people who are working as a Python programmers. Who wants to become their career into Python programming exclusively, then advanced level Python programming, etc., etc. Because there is no end for that, right? So when you are learning programming, there is no end. It's a constant learning, right? So, but basic foundations of any programming language, whether you are learning Java or you are learning Python, basics functionalities are essentially required. What is string? What is variable? What is character? What is a string variable? What is meant by class? What is meant by object? What is meant by function? What is meant by um, interface? Okay, so there are a lot of things which you have to know, because there are possibilities sometimes. I'm not this, because the kind of statement which I'm giving you now, it may be an advanced statement I'm giving. Because why I'm saying this, because if you attend for an interview, especially for BA and all, it's not. But when you're going for any uh, data analysis related jobs or something like in future, may not be immediate. Because I'm talking about future perspective. Because when you want to make a career, you have to see this from the longer perspective, right? On that context, I'm giving you this advice. When you are attending for an interview, that's not something like scenario-based questions you will be asking, especially when you are going for data analysis. For BAQ and all, okay, fine. To an extent, you can manage. But when it comes to data analysis side or programming side, not only specific to data analysis, but the programming side, if you are moving your career, your direction towards that side, okay, then you're going for an interview. There are possibilities may not be happens in the first round, but in the next, second, third rounds and all, they may ask you to write a program. They'll give you a logic, a program they will give. They'll give you some question they'll be giving, right? So they'll ask you to write a program for that particular this thing. Okay. So which you must be ready to do it on screen. Immediately they'll show you, right? So open an editor. We'll tell you one logic. Can you just write a piece of code and show us? That's how generally this programming language kind of interviews will conduct. They don't ask you scenario based because there is nothing to do with scenario because they don't require BAs. They required programmers and they required some analyst. So they may ask you how to write. They may ask you, they will give you one or two programs and they ask you to write a code for that, which you must be ready to write. Okay, that is very important. You must be ready to write it. So when you want to write, first of all, you must be having a clarity of that. What is that you're writing and for what is that you're writing and what purposes you're writing this, right? So that sort of understanding is required and what that sort of understanding is essentially needed to you because what is string, what is buffer, because they may ask you, right? Where is string variable? Because because they want to cross question you, whether you have a experience or not, right? So they'll ask you, where is string here, right? So first of all, if you don't know what is string, then you cannot identify. For example, if I am the person when you're writing the code, let's say, for example, for some reason you learned programming, which is successful from your end. When you're writing a program, or for example, someone has already there is a program which was written by them and they opened it. And they open it and they ask you, where is string variable? Can you show it? For example, if they ask you, what will be of your answer? If you failed in answering it, then easily they can judge that you don't have any programming experience. Okay. I hope you're going to get what is that I'm trying to say. Right. So these are the basic things because at least if you want to go through an interview, what sometimes they will show you a program. Let's say, for example, 1 plus 2 equal to 3, math of addition of two numbers, right? So they will show you a program. They will show one ready-made program. They will show a code and they ask you to explain that code. What exactly this code all about? Or because you should know where is string, what is variable, right? So you should know that first, right? You must be knowing about what is statement. Print is a statement. First of all, you should know print means statement. First, you should know that, right? So then only you can explain, right? So these are the basic things which most of the people take it granted because what is there, right? So because when you go for an interview, these are the questions which people ask. If you fail in doing it, if you fail in answering those questions, that's it, right? So people may not be taken you to the, you may not be succeeded in that interview. So what I'm trying to say, because why I'm saying all these, because before I'm getting into this, even though I have shown you Hello World program. So why is that you are required is that you are always required to know about what is string, what is function, what is class, what is object, what is interface, right? So if you know it, so that it is more helpful to you because there are a couple of programs which I'm going to write in future. Maybe Fibonacci series numbers or adding of two numbers or maybe small things like swapping of two variables, right? So there are list of programs which I'm supposed to explain you. So if you want to know that, first of all, you have to know about the basics: string, buffer, variable, print function, right? So statement, right? So these are all variables, right? So all these things you must be knowing, right? So if you know, so then it is more easy for you to uh, to have confidence, because when you're going for programming, that level of confidence is essentially required, which I'm going to explain you from tomorrow, right? So tomorrow onwards, I'm going to start the basics of Python programming, followed by that subsequently, what are the different programs you need to write, list of programs, at least couple of programs we write, not one and two, at least 5 to 6 minimum in different directions. If I write and show you, so that it will be more, it gives you more confidence when you are attending any interviews, and what kind of questions you come across when you're going for Python or data analysis, majorly data analysis. Python is one, it's equal Python, right? So these are all tools, right? So that end of the day, data analysis, right? So what kind of questions you come across and how to answer those questions. That's all I'm going to discuss from coming days onwards. Is it clear? Is it clear to everyone or not?
Yes.